Everybody, welcome to News by Muse. We are back for another National Geographic show that's coming out. More to really look back. I can't believe it's already 20 years since the tsunami, the big tsunami that hit in the East Coast. And over the years, we've seen movies, we've seen everything else. Now we have a new look at it called Tsunami Race Against Time. We got the director and EP, Daniel Bogado. Daniel, what was it about revisiting this incident from 20 years ago?
Well, it's precisely that it's the 20th anniversary, and it's sometimes difficult to believe that it was 20 years ago. If you were alive at the time, it was such a big news. It was such a tragic story. People forget that in one day we lost nearly a quarter of a million people died in one day. And so I thought I'd worked on another series about 9/11 called One Day in America, also for National Geographic. And the approach of that series was we would focus only on the day itself. The whole story would be told only with video archive of that day. And the only voices that you would hear would be people, survivors who experienced that. And it was a kind of a tapestry of experiences. And the approach, by being so focused mainly on the humanity of the story, it was very successful. It was very well received series. And so we thought, actually, there's another event, which is the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, where we could use a similar approach. The difference being that we would end up speaking to people from Indonesia and Sri Lanka and Thailand, so it would be a real global kind of tapestry of cast of characters. So I was very interested in doing something like that.
And that's what I liked about it is that seeing people who are actually there on the ground and really telling their stories of what occurred. Because over the years, you heard when the incident happened, but then it kind of faded away. And then
Mm.
the movie came out about it, and then some word, but then it faded away again. And it was great to hear the boots on the ground type of stories. And that was awesome of what you did because it really gives you a perspective of what this was and what this event and how it happened and the people who had to deal with that. Talking to them, how much did you learn just like going into it and going into these stories that you didn't hear before?
Well, we always, I always learn a lot going into this. In a way, in this particular project, there were two elements. So first, there was the science of it, which I didn't really know much about it. And I think we all have a lot of misguided or misinformed ideas about what a tsunami looks like. We all think it's a giant wave. It doesn't really look like that, which is why on the day, people could see there was a wall of water in the distance, but they didn't recognize it as a tsunami. And so a lot of lives were lost just by people not knowing what a tsunami looks like. And so one of the main characters in the series is a scientist, Barry Hirschen. He's in the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, and he's getting all these readings. And the problem is that the tsunami is in the Indian Ocean, and they don't have a tsunami warning center because there hadn't been a tsunami there in a very long time. And so he's desperately trying to warn people in these other countries, but there is no system in place. There's no way of doing it. So we followed his journey that day. And actually, we learn a lot about how tsunamis work, what are the warning signs, what people saw on the ground. So that's one aspect. And then the other aspect is the human element and the personal stories. Like anybody who survives a tsunami, it will be one of the biggest events of their life and the most tragic day of their lives for a lot of people. And we were asking them to go back to that day and tell us the story almost minute by minute. And so, in a way, when you begin these projects, you speak to a lot of survivors and you try to get a sense of what it was like and what message the documentary should be conveying. And everybody we spoke to, the main thing they wanted to talk about was about how, in the immediate aftermath, during the tragedy and in the aftermath, everywhere they looked, people were working together to help. Everybody wanted to help. And so for us, that was an important part of the story.
Yeah, and I agree, because it's like now that, especially here in the United States, we're so divided. But to see that and to see that people from around the world came together to help a community really is something that needs to be seen now, I feel, in this country, because sometimes people forget the humanity of things. And I love the fact of showing that humanity of what occurred, what happened, and how everybody came in to help out and to be a part and to be able to help the community there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting when you talk about United States because I worked on this series about 9/11 and at the time we were filming, which was 2019, for the 20th anniversary of that tragedy, Trump was president and there was his investigation. And so we would go to the houses of different contributors. And it was the subject is, people would want to talk about
Yeah.
politics. And yet, we had a lot of people who were from one party, a lot of people who were from the other party. That would give you no idea about the level of extraordinary heroism that they showed and compassion. And so I think you're right that people are very divided, but needlessly so sometimes. We focus so much on the small things when what unites us is so much greater. And I think when we did that series and we did this series, people just ask us to please tell people about how it is possible to put away our difference, how it is possible to come together and work together. And it is almost a shame that it's this huge tragic event. That's what it takes for people to realize that. And so we thought, well, actually, we'll just tell your story. We'll tell your story, and people will see the message. And I think people very easily can see the message of the series.
Yeah. What was there like one particular story that really affected you from what you heard?
Yeah, I mean, we researched a lot of stories, and all of them make it into the series. I think the one that I found most moving is the one on episode 2, and it's about a hotel maid, and she sees the wave coming, and she's got like a 3-year-old son, Dewey, and she runs to hold him, but the wave just takes him away. It's very tragic, and so then we follow her journey, which is extraordinary, incredibly, and it's got an incredibly moving ending. And I just remember when we did the interview with her, she went back to that day and she was just telling us bit by bit all the twists and turns in her incredibly emotional and dramatic story. And everybody in the room was crying. So it was just, and a lot of people have told me about that. Many of the stories they come and they just say, "Oh, that one I found incredibly moving." And so for me, it's just such a wonderful thing that there's this woman and she experienced something 20 years ago, a humble woman, and she gets to share this experience, this extraordinary miracle that happened to her with all these people. Through the power of the documentary and through thanks to Nat Geo. So I think it's just a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, I agree. And to go back to the science, it's funny when the tsunami happened here in California, we noticed like a change into the way of the thinking because of, I mean, earthquake is what causes tsunami over there. Earthquakes happen a lot in California, but the
Mm.
way people look at earthquakes and the effects of a tsunami kind of changed after that event. Um, what do you think how do you think, even though it was such a tragic event, how much positivity came out of it just because of the event and what people learned? And now people have warning systems that are in a lot of different countries that experience earthquakes to prevent another situation like this.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a revolution in tsunami and earthquake science since then. I mean, one of the problems back then is just getting the information, calculating it, getting communication. Everything was very, very limited. Since then, they've learned the lesson in a way. So now there's a tsunami warning system in the Indian Ocean, in all the major ocean basins. Actually, they've put a tsunami warning system. There's much more education, awareness. I hope the documentary series will contribute to that. But I think the real lesson is that back then they didn't create a tsunami warning system in the Indian Ocean because they were not looking forward at that possibility, only as a reaction. And I think the lesson of the tsunami is not just about tsunami, it's just that we should be looking forward at any potential disasters, in California, earthquakes, and think positively forward rather than reactively after it's happened. I think that after every tragedy, seems to be the main lesson that we should be actually much more proactive, much less reactive.
Yeah. And I agree with you 100%. Daniel, thank you so much for stopping with us. Really appreciate it. Love this series. It's very eye-opening, especially since I was born during well, I was around during that time, so I could see what occurred, and to see it 20 years later, it's just it's crazy to believe that it's already been 20 years since this event had happened. But thank you for bringing that to life, and hopefully people get a lot out of it, and it helps see it for the future and helps brings for young kids, brings new scientists, and for others to be able to remember like we're humanity. We need to prepare because things like this happen, and we need to help each other.
Excellent. Well, th thanks very much for having me. Really, I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.